So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sej Naul. I am the lead service delivery manager for an MSP, not too far from me actually, called Digital Craftsmen. Now, I appreciate that it's the end of the day and I'm standing between you and the drinks, so I'll do my best to ensure that we get through this without too much pain. My talk today is essentially going to be a sort of whistle-stop tour around the houses of what I consider effective service delivery to be from an MSP perspective. Now, granted, some of you will be working in an MSP type environment, others of you will be receiving that service from other providers, so hopefully you'll be able to get something from this, just so you either know how you should be managing your clients potentially, or how to manage your third parties. Now, I've got the TD sitting in the front row, so please be kind. So this is today's talk, a quick agenda of what we're going to be discussing. So the first is an introduction to my organisation. Now I assure you it's not just a shameless plug, and it is important because there are a multitude of clients that I manage, and what I want to do is demonstrate what it's like managing them. They all have varied problems and things we have to solve. The second is about core skills. If any of you were in the talk next door with Dav and Jason, you'll realise that the landscape for the service delivery manager is ever changing, and so it's important to continually reinforce the core skills that kind of define you as that professional. The third is a bit more of a sensitive subject, and it's quite personal, and it's not something I particularly like to talk about too much, but I think I should have probably named it effort management more than time and workload management. Broadly, we'll kind of be discussing what good time management should look like, so you know whether or not you're on the road to efficacy. The next one is, of course, managing projects and processes. And as a service delivery manager, you'll be acutely aware that you'll be seconded in at any moment to a new project, a new service being rolled out. And it's about understanding how best to manage those and the expectations of your client as well. The fifth is, of course, about frameworks. There are a multitude of frameworks. How should we adopt them? How should we begin implementing them? Should we look at frameworks as something that we do need to implement, or can we pick and choose and cherry pick? So we'll be diving into that a little bit more. And the final step is about client reviews, our time where we can be face-to-face with our clients, and that's where we're really delivering value to them, describing the service to them, and ensuring that they're getting the best out of it, and equally the business is. So, as I said, the organisation I work for is called Digital Craftsmen. Now, we're a managed service provider, a managed infrastructure provider. We're cloud agnostic, so we focus on all of the public clouds that you'll be familiar with. We do a number of hybrid projects as well, and we also have our own data centres. So we're working in a number of different ways, and hopefully this will kind of get you into my head and what we do. These are just a few of the clients that we manage, and some of them that I actually manage as well. They vary in their size, in their complexity, in their commercial value, and in the way that they perceive value coming from us to them. Now, with First Central, for example, the people I meet with, which is kind of the main point of this talk, is about delivering that value to your client, meeting those people. The people that I meet with are incredibly technical. I meet with the CIO, I meet with the head of technology, I meet with the head of service. For the Grenfell Tower inquiry, equally the infected blood inquiry, we actually meet with the press officers and the marketing team and the project managers, and those are the people who those organisations have placed in charge of managing their infrastructure. They're both on hybrid platforms. They both utilise both AWS and an on-prem system. And the people who are managing those are not technical in the least, not in any way, shape or form. They do not understand the processes involved, and frankly, they don't really care either. They don't care that the system looks like this or lives in this data center. They care about it working. They care about their websites being available. They know that there's going to be peak traffic times. Can it cope with those things? With Heathrow Express and Morse's Club, we deal with more like-minded people, service management folk, that good blend of kind of technical and commercial when we're talking to those people. So the conversations vary. With West Yorkshire Police, it's similar as well. And so what I hope you're kind of getting a grasp of is that in order to be an effective service manager in an MSP, especially in the kind of environment I come from, is that you have to be incredibly multifaceted in your approach. You have to demonstrate that you can speak to all these varying people. And we'll cover that now in some of the core skills. Now, core skills is something that's covered everywhere and you'll see it, and it appears in job specs and things like that. And it's important for me to kind of reiterate this, because what you will tend to find is that your core skills end up being an incredibly valuable indicator of efficacy at work. Now, we all know people and ourselves who have got too much on their plate, for lack of a better term, got too much on their plate, and they're unable to go and do the courses that you want to go do, study in the way you want to study, learn these new things, new developing technologies, or begin to branch out. And so the core skills are an incredibly good indicator of whether or not you have the time to be able to take away from work to build that efficacy into your career. So let's have a look. So the first core skill, in my opinion, is that service delivery, service management, is a career that's grounded in theoretical study. And that's a multitude of technical certifications that I'm sure many of you have, service management framework, like ITIL, project management frameworks as well. Now, the theoretical study is great, and it's something that employers will look for to a degree, mixed with your experience. Your market value is kind of beginning to be defined there. At least that will get you in the door to have a conversation. But it's important that theoretical study exists by researching and understanding case studies, coming to places like here, where it might feel quite practical, but I imagine by the end of the day you've listened to so many talks and heard so much that your mind is kind of bursting with all these new ideas. And so it's important to recognize how important that is, and that's kind of the foundation to which we can build upon. The second is about expert communication. And it seems like simple and clever, but expert communication is something incredibly difficult to master, and in my field and in my career at the MSP, it's even more important because I have to recognize that some of the people that I talk to aren't technical in any way, and some of the people are incredibly technical. They perceive the service and the value from it incredibly differently just by the use of language. And so it's not about just being able to stand up here and talk to you guys, because once you're up here, it's not that hard and we're all kind of in it together, so it's not that bad. But it's also about being verbally capable and being capable in a written capacity as well, to be able to direct your conversations in the way that you need to. At the end of the day, the talk is called The Client and Me, and of course the client is king to some degree, but we all work for our own organizations who pay our salaries, and so we need to be mindful that we can sort of communicate the service to them. Which leads quite nicely to the next point, really, which is about service and value, and that your core skill as a manager in this field is that you are focused on the service, whatever that may be, whether you're supplying it externally, like I am to clients, or whether you're receiving it as in an internal capacity as well. And so understanding the service and being part of it is probably one of the most important things, and the value from that is also defined there too. And so the value is not only in the service itself, it's in the way the service is presented. So in a simple way, I suppose, it's like saying that value, especially in our organization to some degree, value is not necessarily driven at the incident management level. It's not driven at the service desk, it's not driven through tickets that come through. Because to do what is essentially your contractual obligation isn't really a great thing. You know, they're paying for a service, they get the service, so we need to demonstrate value. And so be a manager who's mindful of that and recognizes that that's important is I think quite important. The penultimate thing is actually about managing multiple streams of work simultaneously. When you work in an environment where you manage multiple clients, you have lots of different clients, of course. They have different and varying problems that need to be solved, and you need to be quite adept at being able to manage those things and not losing track of them, not being the bottleneck in your team. And that's an incredibly difficult thing to master, but once you do begin working through the complexity of it, things become much simpler. And it leads you to being that cross-functional employee. The thing about working in a managed service provider is that we work cross-functionally, not only in a technical capacity, but in an operations capacity, in a commercially minded capacity as well. We manage projects, we manage clients, manage BAU, and so it's important to recognize where you fit along this journey and begin to educate yourself accordingly. Now, one of the things about all of these is that they are connected. It's not just a good-looking infographic. And that if you are struggling or able to recognize that you have a problem with, say, managing multiple streams of workload, the business is expanding, there's a great deal more clients coming through. Well, what can you do to resolve that? Well, we know that project managers are great at managing multiple streams of workloads because they manage lots of projects at a time. And so by going and being able to study some project management frameworks, whether that be, that you go to the Knowledge Academy or somewhere like that, or even, in your own time, what it will allow you to do is it will create this kind of cycle of education that allows you to be better at communicating, because project managers are really good at communicating. They communicate with lots of people all the time. It's a key aspect of their job. And it will allow you to be cross-functional in the way that you want to. Your projects will be able to be managed far, far better than they are now. And you're still a service delivery manager focusing on BAU. And so they're all interconnected, and I think once we begin understanding that, you can really build upon it. As I say, your core skills are a marker for your efficacy at work. How much are you able to really look at these and go back and say, actually, I've got some time to do this, I've got some time to improve. Your personal development is incredibly important. You can't be effective to your client, to your organisation, if you're left behind. And we all know people who've been in the industry for many, many years, and they find it difficult to kind of get out of that rut. And the last thing you want to do is be overtaken by some young whippersnapper who's got 15 ITIL qualifications, because nobody wants that. So the next is about time and workload management. Like I said, it's a bit of a touchy one because it's so personal to everybody, and I don't want to stand up here and say, look, I know how you should manage your time because you're doing it wrong. But what instead I will do is try to allow you to understand what good time management or good effort management looks like. Where you kind of need to have some breathing space and some gaps. So we'll start off with the worst, and hopefully we'll get on to what looks like an ideal pattern of kind of effort management. It kind of goes without saying that if your time management looks like this, one of two things are happening. Either the organisation is getting rid of you, or you are getting rid of them. Because there shouldn't be a period of time where you've got, a couple of weeks and you're not doing a great deal at all. So that's pretty much self-explanatory and quite simple. But we'll move on to something which isn't great, but is probably far, far more common. And that's that you feel maxed out. You're maxed out most of the time. You're kind of working your fingers to the bone. Every day there's something new. There are new problems, there are new projects, there are new clients. There's so much to do, and it's becoming a bit overwhelming. And this is a really complex place to be as a kind of professional, because you have to recognize one of two things. Is it that it's overwhelming objectively? So it's overwhelming for everybody. You say to anyone, they'll go, yeah, no, you've got loads on. Or is it that you can't handle the workload that's being presented to you? Could somebody else come in and do what you're doing? Would they be swamped in the same way you are? And so it's complicated to know whether or not you should go to the organisation and say, look, we've got all these new clients in over the past year. Things have changed dramatically, and we need more resource to help us, to allow you to breathe a bit more so that you're not maxed out every day. It's important to recognise if you're feeling these kind of things at work, because it will allow you then to do the things that are most important, do the things that you also find most interesting. And so this is what a reasonable workload looks like. Now, take the Monday to Friday 2-week thing kind of loosely. What I mean is, regardless of how far you step back and how long your timeline is, I just want there to be some kind of flow and peak. Now, if you're working, say, 1 week and you're really, really maxed out, and that's what you're doing, and then the next week you're kind of twiddling your thumbs, waiting for the next thing to fall down the pipe, it's not ideal either. It's better, of course, because you've got a bit of breathing space, and the hope is that you'll utilise some of that time. But it's complicated psychologically. It makes it difficult for you to kind of get up and think, oh God, now work's going to ramp up in the next couple of days. Like, what am I going to do? And so there was a study recently published, probably not that recently, about a year ago, I think, in the New Scientist, and it was about time and workload management. It looked a lot like that, actually. And it said that workers and their productivity and their ability to be happy or happier at work was best illustrated by a workflow that went up and down, the ebb, the flow, the wave goes in, the wave goes out. That even on the days when they're quiet, they're still doing all the work they need to do. So, for example, if you take if you do Tuesday there, for example, you say, well, what does that mean? You're kind of doing 60% of what your work. It's not that. It's that you're completing all the tasks within your day. You're doing everything that you're supposed to be doing, but you're not having to exert yourself so far that you have no room to breathe. And that's what's important about the days that are hitting around 90%. Because if you work in an environment that's ever-changing, and mine is like that, you need to have that bandwidth. You need to be able to adapt to something that's going to happen, because sooner rather than later, something is going to catch on fire and they're going to need you. And the last thing you want to do is down tools here when you're so maxed out that you don't know what to do in order to be able to help up here. It doesn't work. And so you need to be able to try to find that flow within your work. Now, I'm not saying I have all the answers or that I'm the most effective service manager, and that's why I talk about this. But there are some things that you can do that should help. So these are a few kind of points that I have. And they're quite simple, and you've come across them all before, but I think the more that you focus on them, the better it will lead you to servicing your clients and to be providing that service out from the business. The first is, of course, to prioritize effectively, which is a simple way to say, do things in the way that they should be done, I suppose. But it's sort of easier said than done. So what is effective prioritization really? Well, people go, well, it's the thing that's most important. They're on fire, put the fire out. And you go, yeah, okay, that's fine, but there's not always fires all the time. So how do you prioritize effectively? Is it the thing that has the most commercial impact? And you say, well, that impacts the business greatly in a commercial way. I'm going to jump behind that. It's not necessarily true. You know that there is a pattern to your work to some degree. You know that you've got client reviews coming up and they'll be at the end of the month, beginning of the quarter, or whatever. And so you're able to prioritize your work because your work to some degree is predictable. There is the nature of the work that's unpredictable, which is why your workflow should have that kind of flow. But as long as you have that, then actually you can predict some of what you're going to do and allow yourself to prioritize effectively. The next is a simple one, but it's something I do, and I just thought I'd share it with you, and that I take a little bit of time out of my day just to ensure that I'm planning the next part of the day or the next bits kind of as effectively as I could do. And it's really simple. You can do it. It's usually best done at the end of the day. I mean, look, if you finish at 5:30 and it's 5:15, there's not usually a great deal happening on a normal kind of Tuesday. Everything's kind of okay. And so it's a good time to kind of try to do that. And these are good habits to kind of be in practice of. Batch similar tasks together is a really simple one, actually. Get all your emails out first thing in the morning. You know that you've got reviews to do, so you get those done in the middle of the day. You just block bits of your day out, and that will allow you to predict your workload by planning a percentage of it. And so if you can plan 70%, which would be ideal, sometimes it is ideal, sometimes it's not, but if you can plan a great deal of your day, you can actually have a lot more free time than you would think. And you won't just have 30% more free time, because what you'll be doing is you'll be exerting far less effort in your management, in your time management, to achieve the things that you need to achieve on that day. So this is kind of what you should be doing, and I think we'll move on next to managing projects and processes, which is, for me, kind of the how you do those things. So the first thing I'm going to say is that, well, this is something that I do, and I would kind of ask you to try and do it yourself, and that's to manage your work like projects. And I don't necessarily mean that you need to get that many people involved in it. You sort of manage it as a silo project, and this is your own workload. So how do we manage our workload? Well, we have a ticketing system, so tickets will come through, and I'll have to look at those and resolve them in due course, and they're about things that can be kind of measured. They're usually quite static things. And then I have my inbox, which is invariably full from clients asking for certain things, and those are a bit less kind of static, and they change in the way that they are. They're conversational, and so I have those two bits that I need to do. And then there is new stuff coming down the sales pipeline that we need to get involved in. There are existing projects that I'm running. So how do I manage all this stuff all together? I don't want to be the bottleneck. I'm supposed to be the conduit for value. So the way that I do it, actually, and it's quite an easy one, and lots of you probably use it, is I just use Trello. Do any of you use Trello here? Yeah? My people in my organisation. So Trello is really simple. All right? It's a free application online. I've got some links at the end, so you can check it out. And really what you do is you begin placing your stuff into what's a kind of to-do board. So in your 10-15 minutes of admin a day, you whack in everything that's there. There's a little bit of duplication of work because I've got the ticketing system, so I kind of say, well, I'll make sure I respond to that ticket. And do all those things. You can set yourself some reminders, and it's a single pane of glass. Get everything out of your head. As soon as you begin to think, okay, I've got this to do, and then in your head you've got a list of 5 things, it's a downward spiral, and it's not great. So Trello is really easy, and it allows you to manage your workload. It's something that I would say you should do. I've not been paid any sponsorship money, but I think it's quite a good thing, and I think you'll find it quite useful. So the next thing about managing projects and processes is, I suppose, understanding the difference between project managers and service delivery managers, or the difference between projects and BAU. And it's quite simple, I suppose, that you'll know that, once a product has been created and delivered to the client, the project manager stops, and the service delivery manager wouldn't. At that point, he'd take over. Now, my organisation has been quite forthcoming, and I think it's quite a good thing, actually. And so what we've done is we've incorporated the role of the service delivery manager and the project manager together. And I'll touch upon this again in just a moment, a bit more comprehensively, but I'll just leave you with that for now. The final slide here actually is about mapping your processes first. So we all do ITIL, if one can do ITIL. We all do ITIL, and we all are in charge of some processes to some degree, the incident management process, the change management process. We look after them, we curate them. I certainly do, not only internally, but also for my clients, to ensure things are happening the way that they should. Now, what you should think about is actually, where do you fit into that process? If you're leading a service delivery team, where should they be involved? And it's easy to have big, complex process maps, but I'm going to show you one that's quite simple. It's actually a genuine one, and it's one that we use. I've obviously simplified it for here. But it's a process that we're fortunate enough to engage in quite often. It's the client onboarding process. We've got a new client, sales have picked up on some leads, things are going as they should. And the process commences, and it naturally commences in sales. And so as it exists in sales, there are two things that we do. We do a scoping call, so we give that client a call and talk to them, see that, are we all on the same page? Can we supply the right service that they need, and will they be receiving it in the way that's useful for them? And then if that goes well, we have a discovery workshop where we go and meet with those people. Now, this didn't used to be the case, but over the past year or so, we've been fortunate enough to implement it, and it's helped hugely. And it's that the service delivery manager would never be involved at that point. As I said, we don't have a dedicated project management office, and we don't have a dedicated project management framework in and of itself. It's that each service delivery manager is empowered to manage those projects, because why shouldn't they? And you'll see what I mean. It makes great sense to you. So now, I've been introduced to the client, and they're not really a client yet. They've not paid anything, nothing's been signed, there's no contract, all that stuff is kind of free, and we're working it out. It's still in sales. It's a function of sales, and this is part of your core skills, becoming cross-functional. So we move on to the project part, because sales have managed to secure it, and things are going well, and we did really well in our calls. And we begin to onboard this client, and so this is the point again where the service delivery manager becomes the project manager. But also, we're beginning to produce work and documentation. So we're defining the SLAs with our client here. We are writing statements of works, ensuring that our contracts are as they should be, that the contract demonstrates as much value as it possibly can, especially at that initial stage. There's always time for review later, but you want them to have kind of what they need by addressing their critical business needs. And then we move through to technical. Technical exists throughout the onboarding process, and naturally those are the people who are responsible for the work of either migrating that client, building and architecting their infrastructure, all of those sorts of things. And then it really comes into its own towards the end, where the project ends. The project manager would normally leave, but you're a service delivery manager, so you can't. And you continue with that client through BAU, and you continue to manage them. And what you're doing is you're providing continuity on a kind of unprecedented scale, because you're there all the way throughout their journey. Yeah, there's some account management people, there's some sales people they know, but not somebody like you, not somebody with those cross-functional skills, somebody who can talk business, somebody who can talk commercial, somebody who can talk technical, and somebody who they feel is on their side. So, you're championing the client in your own organization, and when you're with the client, you're championing your own organization. It's that kind of thing. And being cross-functional and doing this really, really, really helps. And it allows you to be more effective, because they know you. And at the end of the day, it's just people. It doesn't matter about the service or the technology, it's just people. There's somebody paying for it, you're delivering it, they want a face, and you're that face. You're that conduit of value. And so this has been a really instrumental part of things for us. So the next slide, of course, is about frameworks. Now, frameworks are incredibly complex. There's hundreds of them, and the landscape is kind of littered with it. Like if you begin looking at your own personal development plan, it becomes complicated. You don't know where you should excel. Should you do something a bit more technical so you can speak the language, which is the reason I do certain things. because we're dealing with so many different cloud offerings that we need to know that when I'm talking to somebody who's interested in Azure, that we're using the right phrases and the right terminology. And same with AWS, same with our own infrastructure. So if you Google service management, if you're inclined to do these kind of things like I am, you'll end up with something like this from Wikipedia. And the thing I want to talk to you about is not which is best, because I don't think anybody has the answer to that, but actually what might be most useful. So has anybody heard of FitSM in here? My colleague Mikhail puts his hand up. He's actually a huge proponent of FitSM and has done some work with them. It was introduced to me from him, actually. I wish I had learned it a long time ago, to be honest, because when he came around to tell me about it, I thought I could have really used that like 6 months ago. So what FitSM is it's a standard lightweight IT service management. By its kind of place within that diagram, you can see that it is a complementary framework. It's not one out there to get rid of ITIL, it doesn't want to get rid of COBIT, it doesn't want to get rid of anything. It wants to work with all of them and allow you to work with them in a way that I've not come across before. So what FitSM really does is it has these kind of 6 requirements that go through. But really what's important for me is that it gives you the how to do something pretty much immediately. So if you've got a new service offering and you define a new SLA, or the portfolio of services has grown and you need to have a service catalogue, well, you'd kind of try to recall all your ITIL stuff and think, okay, what should that look like? How does it exist, especially if it doesn't exist initially? And so you're working through this problem, which is part of your job, to problem solve, to work through that problem. But what you're doing is you're essentially trying to revise things that you've probably heard in courses and things, rather than doing the work and thinking about it critically. And I think that's what FitSM does best, is it allows you to begin doing the work pretty much straight away. You can use the templates that it gives you, and you can begin to use them immediately. So instead of spending a day thinking about how you might do something, you can actually spend that day doing that thing. And then after that, you reevaluate, take it back to the team. Is it working well? How does it go? And you continue in that continual service improvement cycle. And I think it's really important. I've got a couple of links at the end, and it's something that you should all kind of check out. I'm by no means a FitSM expert. I haven't even completed the foundation certification, which I think is to its testament, because you don't have to, in order to use it, in order to really utilize it in your organization, you don't have to have those certifications. But once you begin seeing the value in it, you'll feel as though you kind of want to achieve them anyway. This next slide is a bit of a headache, but what I wanted to just demonstrate, again, it will be one of the takeaways I provide at the end, is that FitSM exists as a complementary framework, as I said, and these are the areas in which it maps on to existing frameworks. So by using it, what you know is that you're not taking away from your organization's ITIL best practices that have existed for years and years and years before you were even there, is that actually you're adding the service in complementary, you're slipping things in. So it's another tool in your kind of toolkit. And that really is driving that efficacy home, because as soon as you're able to think critically about the work that you're doing is the point at which you're really working. You're not thinking about how you should do something, you're actually producing the work. And it's an incredibly important part, I think, about frameworks. And it can be really complicated, and I think that this kind of cuts through some of that complexity, and you can find it really useful. This is, I believe, one of the final slides I have, actually, one of the penultimate ones even, and it's about client reviews. And this talk being about clients is really kind of an important slide for me, actually. And they're in no particular order, but we'll kind of go through them together. And so client reviews are where the value lives, and it really is where the value lives. As I said, the value doesn't live in the incident management section of or incident management process of the organization or the service. It exists at the point in which you can speak to somebody and you can talk to them and you can understand how it's being delivered. Of course, it goes without saying that the service should be delivered effectively, because it can't all be failing and then you hope that you go there and you're going to deliver all this great value, but at least you'll get some honest feedback. So this is really where the value lives. Being face-to-face with your clients is so important, and there are organisations I've been part of that don't do this as often as they should, and they have no idea about what's happening on the inside. It's about, of course, being transparent. It's about holding yourself accountable first. The last thing you want to do is go into a client meeting and you be the one who's under scrutiny. There are problems, they exist, there are incidents, things happen. But the point is about being accountable for those and demonstrating it to your client. And if you're actually the person who's managing your third party, so if you're the client in my world, then you should know that actually my MSP should be holding themselves accountable for that. Why am I asking them about these things? Why am I asking them for a root cause analysis? They should be bringing this to me and showing it, because they're not managing you well, and that in turn creates a slightly tenuous relationship, and it's not the best place to be. So holding yourself accountable is one of the most important parts. Naturally, the SLA report isn't the most fun that you could ever have at work, but it is an important part of the job, and what you need to do is think about value and think about and think about how that value can be portrayed. And I think by looking at problems, and if you don't have a dedicated problem management manager or anything like that occurring, it's not occurring at the service desk level, that's your point to actually say, yes, there's been this many incidents over the quarter because we know people want to know what's going on and what they're paying for, and that's all fine. But say, actually, these are things that are more important, and group them together and say, well, these are the problems that we see that you're facing. Actually, over this quarter, you've had, 20 standard incidents, but actually 6 of them are about sort of disk alerts. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that's more than a quarter of them over the quarter, albeit quite a quiet quarter, but nevertheless. So we can begin preempting and having more forward-thinking conversations. Review your SLAs. Now, there are places I know where SLAs seem really static, and they're a complicated beast. Nobody wants to be part of that watermelon SLA culture where you go in and you go, yeah, look, here's a report, everything's green, everything's perfect, 100% uptime, no problem. And they go, yeah, but we were out for 6 hours last night. And you go, yeah, but it's in the contract, so you're all right. You're not. I mean, the thing is you can review your SLAs at any time. I do it all the time. We go in and I talk to them and I say, well, look, this is what's been happening. If there's been a kind of degraded service over a time, you can say, well, what was the reason for that? What was the business impact to you on that? Did it really matter that you went down for an hour during the middle of the night? Or was it a huge problem for you? So you can review the SLAs and you amend your contracts accordingly. I'm not saying that this is something you do every month, but nevertheless, you should be finding out how the business is changing, the client's business is changing. Because without meeting them face-to-face, we just don't know. We just don't know about their critical business needs. We don't know how things are changing, because all we're getting is tickets about problems, and there's a couple of changes that come through, things like that. So we really need to kind of get under the skin of our clients and understand what they're going through. Knowing your client and your audience is important. As I said at the beginning, I deal with a multitude of different clients, and that those clients I deal with a multitude of different people. Understanding who my clients are is incredibly important. I know that if I go to see the guys at the Grenfell Tower inquiry, that I'm going to be meeting with the press officers, and the press officers are deeply concerned with website availability. They have no regard for anything else really. What they want to know is it going to be available? The inquiry just, the phase 1 report just came out. Are we going to be available? Is it going to be okay? Because that's what they want to know. They want to know whether things work. There are a few technical clients who want to know the ins and outs, but for the most part, people just go, well, we pay you, does it work? And yes is not an appropriate response. So you need to go back and say, yes, it is working, and this is why. And you explain it to them. My reports are all tailored to each individual client. They do start off in a template kind of format, but they're different for each person, because I know that they have to deliver that report subsequently to somebody else. And they'll be delivering it, and we'll say, well, how's your third party doing? Because you've been pushing through a lot of change, and it's costing this much money. So are they doing well? They go, yeah, actually, look, here's the report they gave me. And they understand it as well. So there's a knock-on effect to understanding your audience. Manage your third parties. We live now in this new world of decentralized IT, multi-vendor environments. There's things like Cyan to help you cope with that and manage your third parties. And this is the time to do it. It's not the time to defer responsibility and say, well, no, the infrastructure's fine. It was the developers who knocked everything over. That's not really the way to do it. Of course, you accept the faults that are your own and you describe the ones that aren't, but it's about managing your third party and ensure that they're also delivering value. For us, it happens very often. The contract with us and the contract is with us and the client. So if we bring in our own third parties, it's important for us that we manage those people, those parties, that they're delivering the service in the way that we feel it's acceptable, because they have a direct link to the client. Often that means that we have website development teams, and front-end development can often be seen as more valuable than infrastructure because it's got an aesthetic value. People can see it immediately. We log onto the website, oh look, it's there. Nobody cares about what's going on at the kind of back end. So it's important to be managing your clients appropriately. Arming yourself with knowledge kind of goes without saying. You're the one who's producing the report, so it's incredibly important that you understand it. I've had reports delivered to me by people who have sort of, I don't know how they've spat this report out from whatever system they've used, and you go, well, what does that mean? And they go, actually, you know what? At the end of this, I'm making a note and I'll get back to you about it. And you're going, yeah, but you've just arrived to do this now, so you should know these things. So arming yourself with knowledge, understanding the systems that you're working with, and understanding the systems for your clients will help you and lead you to have better, more forward-thinking conversations. You don't want to be on the back foot when you're in front of your client. That's like the worst place to be. But the client isn't always king, and sometimes you have to manage your client as well. We have processes internally of how to raise tickets, whether things are urgent or not urgent, how to raise change. Is the client following your process, following your business process? Are the technical guys so deeply unhappy with the way that this client handles things that they almost don't want to do the work for them? And so it's important to reiterate to your clients to say, look, this is the way in which we manage your work, so you have to follow suit. You can adjust it and tailor it accordingly, but nevertheless, it's a great time to do that, and it is something that I've done on several occasions. The final slide here is actually about continual service improvement. Now, it's incredibly difficult to create a conversation, a structured conversation around continual service improvement. It feels a bit ethereal, it feels like you're a bit salesy, and it's not a nice place to be, especially if you're not a super commercial service delivery manager, and I'm certainly not that. So I don't want to push clients to do something, but I don't want to have, I know we're having a review, so in its very nature, it's retrospective, but that doesn't mean that our conversations have to be about the past. If the things are good and, you know, the SLAs match and they're not sort of fake or pretend, and actually there's some value there, and everything else matters, well, how do you begin having this conversation about continual service improvement? And it's something that I did and changed, and actually when I did do this, it's a really simple thing, and once I did do it, then my conversations changed with my clients. I began talking about the future. They began talking about the business and how their business is changing and all these new developments coming through and how the sales pipeline from their side is increasing. And it's really difficult to have these kind of, like, you go, how's the business going? And they go, yeah, it's going right. And then they're like, okay, well, that didn't give me a great deal. So what I use is, it's essentially a CI list, a risk register. This is lifted essentially off one of my reports. And it's really easy. So I think, well, I understand the client systems because I'm following my own advice and I'm arming myself with knowledge. And I think, well, what could they do with that they don't have? So I put my commercial hat on and think, okay, well, for this client, they had an outage, and the outage was detrimental to them, but it wasn't so bad that, you know, we're being scolded for it or giving back service credits. It's just like, oh, that's a bit crap. And it's like, look, we solved it and this is the reason and it won't happen again. But actually, there's an opportunity there to have a conversation about that. Now, nobody wants to rehash old war wounds from the past, and you go into a quarterly or 6 monthly review, and you're saying, well, yeah, look, in January this happened, and you're like, it's December now. Like, who wants to talk about the terrible service then? You don't. But the point is you can lead them into conversations about continuous service improvement. This is your CI pipeline, and this is essentially your project pipeline. And you can begin doing it as a service delivery manager and say, actually, I'd rather have these more forward-thinking conversations. So what do they look like? Talk to the tech guys. So what is it about them that you think could be improved? I work very closely with the technical director, solutions architects, and even guys on the service desk. And they know an infinitely more than I do about the client systems, because it's their job to, and also because it's my job not to. So asking them, really, what can we change? How would, if you had a blank checkbook, how would you improve their service? And they've always got cost at the back of their mind, so they'll give you some good recommendations. Begin having forward-thinking conversations. We don't want to talk about the past all the time. That's why it's about problem management, because that leads you to this as well. It's about looking at continual service improvement. About 5 minutes. I think we're pretty much at the end, actually, and we are. So this is the final slide, with you guys and me at the centre of the service. Don't be too kind of delusions of grandeur and be like at the centre of the world. But you are the centre of the service, and the service delivery managers in my organisation certainly are. So there are loads of things that are complex and difficult about being a service delivery manager. It's incredibly fulfilling, but it is complicated. And by trying to only make your client happy, you will invariably not be able to supply the best service to them, because they don't always know what's right. And the pressures that you feel as a service delivery manager are kind of tenfold. You feel it from the client because they're the guys talking to you. You have to be mindful of technical, and that they don't hate the client, and that you have a good relationship with them. Information is being kind of passed on to you quite easily. Requests are going through easily. You're not finding these stumbling blocks where they're going, look, it's going to take 6 hours to do that disk increase. I think we're just going to, I'll leave it till tomorrow. And you're going, I know that it only takes 20 minutes. And you're, of course, accountable to your management, the people who are paying your salary, the people who do your reviews. And they're looking at you and asking, is the service delivering the value it should? Are we making the appropriate margin? Is the client happy? And they're asking all these generalized questions, and there's you in the center kind of managing this all. And you won't make everybody happy all of the time. It just won't happen. But as long as you can make most of the people happy most of the time, then I think you're winning, to be honest. Your role is as the active intermediary between it all. You're not just passing information, you're managing all of that. And when there's a problem between one element, it's actually a failure of service delivery, not a failure of that independent department. So you should be controlling that. The takeaways are quite simple, really. Remember that you're the value conduit. You're the one in the middle of it all. You're the one who makes it work and provides value to that service that you're offering. That efficacy is not necessarily speed. It's not about being quick at things. Complex problems need complex solutions sometimes. They take time. But it's your ability to manage all the other things in your job, in your role, and that will allow you to be effective. And always find time for your personal development, because nobody else will. And at the end of the day, it's your career and it's your life, and your success is mine, as mine is yours, in kind of perpetuating the service management career and profession. So the better we all do is kind of the better for all of us, really. Takeaways can be found here, digitalcraftsmen.com, ITSMF 2019. You can take a picture of that slide if you'd like anything. I've also put a copy of the presentation up there as well, so anything you might need should be available. Hope I didn't bore you today. Thank you very much.
There's possibly a chance for one question. Or are you just anxious for a drink? Really?
Drinks now.
I've got a question.
Go on.
So a lot of the theme that came out through all of the sessions that I've been to today, big words, agile. How has agile changed the service management in your experience?
The thing is as we incorporated the role of the service delivery manager and the project manager, we tend to think of things, I suppose, in a kind of a rather old-fashioned way, and we say, well, they are kind of waterfall projects, really. We know the client onboarding project is a waterfall project. It exists at one stage, ends at one stage. There's no need for iteration in between it. But the agility exists in the kind of multifaceted nature of the professional. And so what we can do is because I can manage projects effectively, I should like to think as well as some project managers, and because I'm a service delivery manager by trade, and that's my choice profession, that actually I can be the agile element to those projects. Being cross-functional, providing continuity to the client is actually what makes these things more agile. We're quite a small organisation, although we service exceptionally large clients, and so we're kind of agile in nature. We're always adopting new techniques and always happy to hear the client side of things. We're able to be bespoke when necessary.